Okay, so far so good. But what happens when and if the ontological argument goes pear-shaped? Now, the ontological argument trades on the notion that God is the necessarily existing being. Premise 1. God is the necessarily existing being. God, subject, predicate, necessarily existing being. Where my nose is, the word is, the copula. Now, there are two problems with constituting the premise in this way. First of all, the premise might not be a well-formed formula at all. Okay, so if you've had a logic class, one of the things that people go on about are well-formed formulas. A well-formed formula in mathematics would be something like this. 7 plus 5 equals 12. There's a sequence, and each of the meaningful components of the statement is in its proper place. 7 plus 5 equals 12. On the other hand, I'm talking gibberish if I say something like equals 7 plus 12, 5. Okay, now, what if the statement, God is the necessarily existing being, what if that isn't a well-formed formula? What if the pattern is subject, copula, subject, copula, and then another form of the copula, another form of is. So in other words, what we might be saying is God is ising, because necessarily existing being is just the same thing as saying is. And necessarily, it's unclear what that's doing there. And so if it's not a well-formed formula, Descartes is committing what Aristotle called the fallacy of babbling. Okay, and we saw how this occurred in our discussion of Aristotle on predication, and how Aristotle thought that making existence a predicate, or making a substantive predicate a being, led Plato to all sorts of difficulties. So in our discussion of Plato and Aristotle on substance, we saw the various difficulties associated with putting the substance in the predicate position. That is, the third man argument, color blindness to various kinds of predication, and so on. And so the ontological argument runs against the categorical logician's dictum that existence is not a predicate. So, if existence is not a predicate, then the ontological argument fails on the grounds of validity. So it's just the ontological argument fails because it doesn't have a good logical structure. So, what are the knock-on effects if the ontological argument goes pear-shaped? So where we were at the end of Meditation 5 was that the idea of God guaranteed the resemblance of the sensation of thirst and the physical event of thirsting in Descartes' body. Get rid of the idea of God, and we get rid of the guarantee of resemblance and certainty of corresponding physical and mental events. We get to doubt Descartes' body, and we're left with the situation at the end of Meditation 2. Solipsism is back. So now we see that once the ontological argument fails, solipsism is back with a vengeance. With the cogito argument, Descartes has shown only that he can be certain that he exists only when he's having a transient mental event. Such limited certainty is not going to be sufficient to found the sciences on sure and certain foundations. And that has been Descartes' whole project in the Meditations. And further, even if we grant mind-body dualism, that there are stable and continuing mental substances and physical substances, we're not going to be able to explain how the two interact. And so this brings us back again to the problem of non-material causation, the very problem that was bedeviling Plato in the Timaeus. But you'll notice at this point the problem of mental causation is restricted, or at least confined to the area of epistemology, rather than undertaken in the larger venue of Plato's metaphysics, particularly the metaphysics of ante rem universals. And so, what do we make of this big mess? Well, David Hume has an answer. Stay tuned.